It had been a while since I was last able to get out and visit Jerry Hammond. Last year, much of Jerry's fishing time had been taken up filming a show called Carp Wars, making it tricky for him to really get his teeth into his own personal fishing, where he was starting out on a water named Vinitro, home to a fish called the half-lin, a good 50 which has previously been caught at over 59 pounds. It's on the banks of Vinitro where I'm meeting Jerry today. He'd had a very good result this time last week, taking 3 fish including a colossal common known as Arnie, which pulled the needle on Jerry's scales round to over 42 pounds. It's easy to look in the weeklies or on social media and see an angler who's enjoyed the fruits of a good session and jump to conclusions regarding the captures, but the catch picks can often be the tip of the iceberg and not fully representative of the hard work and determination which makes those captures possible. Whether the targets are from low stock waters, huge inland seas, weed-infested underwater jungles, or they're just notoriously tricky fish to catch, or a combination of many factors, the reality of going after these fish can lead to lengthy periods in pursuit. The learning curves are often steep, with runs of blanks often being taken as the norm, and without a strong mindset and a whole lot of determination, many anglers would simply burn out and give up. With a hat-trick of recent captures under his belt, I thought it a good time to find out from Jerry about his time on the water to date.
Right, you find me on a lake down in Chichester called Vinitro. The reason for me joining this particular lake is because there lives in here a massive mirror called the half-lin, and it really is a colossal fish. I witnessed and photographed it last year in the autumn at 59.4, and it's a brute, and one that I dearly want to catch, and that's why I don't mind driving for the 2 hours down here to try and catch it. This is my second season. I've been coming down every single week since March. I've done a lot of nights, you know, a hell of a lot of nights, over 60 probably. And this is one tough water, I'm not joking. For the whole year, from January, it done 5 bites. In the summer, it is top to bottom weed. And just giving you sort of like an indication of how difficult and tricky the lake can be. Travelling down here all that way, I don't want to be on here for years. I really do want to get cracking and try and catch it. I did find a real nice, there was a big bank of weed, and just before it I was getting a really good drop and a lovely clear area, and I thought, right, that's a starting point. And I started baiting that spot up, and I was putting in a big bucket of hem, tigers, boilies, just getting the food in, because my attitude or my thinking was these fish have spawned. They've had 5 weeks on here where it was closed. There wasn't no bait going in. They must be starving. That's what I thought. So anyway, I gave them the food. And the first bite to my left-hand rod on the baited spot was one of the stockies. So I thought, okay, like that's a bite, you know. It's not what I want, but it's a bite. And nevertheless, I knew everything was working. Then I had a 20 common, which is also not one of the. I'm not being funny. It's a lovely fish, but not what I'm here for. But it's still a bite. My next session, I've had another 20 common, a 22 common off the left-hand rod. So I'm thinking, am I ever going to catch any of these big 25 that's in here, like, you know? It was a morning at about 7:30 one morning, the right hand rod's gone, and I've had a really good battle, and I thought, this ain't no 20 common, this is a good one. Cut a long story short, I landed like an absolute fabulous fish, a fish called 8 and 10, and it was just over 40 pound, an absolute cracker. To me, that was the start of a good year, I believe. Yeah, I thought I'm going to keep going with this spot for a while. There's something good on this spot. You know, the fish were visiting it, obviously, and they were getting on the bait. You just don't know what's going to turn up next. Right, after the session where I caught the 8 and 10, I sort of lost track of it a bit, like, and a good mate went in the area and actually had 8 and 10 again. I don't quite know where he caught it from, but it was in the same swim, which proved that the fish was coming back to the same area again, and that's an hard one to catch. I came down that session he had the 8 and 10, I came down. He caught it on the Saturday, I think. I came down on the Sunday night, Monday morning, and he landed the big girl. Spawned that way at £50.4, and lovely to be there. He's a good mate, and he well deserved it. And just to see the big one on the bank again, and she was completely empty at £50.4. So God only knows how big it was, you know, while it was carrying its weight. But one thing that is good, she puts on, the lads reckon, after they spawn, £1 a week. So, you know, within 10 weeks, she's back up to £60 again. And hopefully, by that reckoning, she'll be about 53 as we speak right now. So that'll do me. And that kind of brings us up to the session I had last week. So we're nearly up to date. And bearing in mind, this has been spread over 60 odd nights this year, you know, fishing all around the lake, everywhere. I done last week was my first session in here. There's still a hell of a lot of weed out there subsurface, but like there's a lot of spots to fish to. And I came down here, had a little flick about with the lead, and it weren't long before I found 2 lovely spots. I was doing about 25 spods a night on each rod, with like hemp, tigers, boilies, you know, pigeon conditioner, just a real nice old mixture. And basically just fishing like either pop-ups or tigers over the top. And the next day, the spot was actually glowing yellow. There was carp feeding like crazy on there. And I had a rig out there, I couldn't get a bite. I don't know what was going on. You could see the vortexes coming up, and it was kicking off on my spot. First morning I had a bite in on that spot was 7 o'clock in the morning. The left-hand rod has just absolutely erupted and screamed off, and right panicking sort of take because it's weeding me up, and eventually landed a fish, a real stunner called single scale, one of the oldest in the lake. Absolute lovely old fish, really dark, and it was about an ounce under 33 pound. You know, I was absolutely made up to come up the other end of the lake, start fresh in a new swim, new area. To catch anything out of here is a bonus, and to get that I was just, yeah, well made up. Following day, nothing happened, but the last night, on the Wednesday night, I'd gone to sleep early that night last week. I was really tired because I've been getting up at 4 o'clock every morning, watching the lake and absolutely wiping myself out. I normally leave home about 2, 3 in the morning, so I crashed out about 8, half 8 that night. And sometime later on, pitch black, the left-hand rod has absolutely erupted. So the same spot again is done another bite. Quite a tough battle. Like, I thought it was about 3 in the morning, but it was only like 11:30. So I was getting the rod up high, winding forward and walking, and luckily managed to get it sort of within netting distance. And another absolute cracking fish, a common called the dead common. I was absolutely like blown away. 230s, can't be bad. Like, you know, I went back to bed and couldn't sleep. I think I was awake till nearly 2 in the morning. Think I've just had 230s in this session. What a result! Well, between 2 and 4 in the morning, I was hardly sleeping. I kept waking up, turning over, probably still pumped full of adrenaline, and just couldn't get my head down. Just as it seemed like I was going to get asleep, the right-hand rod that hasn't done a bite at all was off. And I mean, a real savage, ferocious take. I picked the rod up and sort of felt it like weed me up, and then sort of slowly wound down on it, and it just went like steaming off like a train. There are some big weed beds out there, and it managed to find sanctuary in one of them. So I'm now locked solid, and it's like it's still dark, you know. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm gonna have to get the boat. Well, I rung my mate. He's only a couple of swims down, and he brought the boat down. I got the life jacket on and the mat and everything, and landing it all in the boat, and made my way out there, just thinking, what is on the end? You know, it could be the big girl. Who knows? I had to put the rod down, and I was slowly sort of pulling at the line and picking weed off the line, and then all of a sudden, I felt something heavy. Didn't feel it move, but I thought something's got to be on there. Otherwise, I'll just pull the rig out of the weed or pull a lump of weed out of the bed. Anyway, just as I'm sort of pulling the weed off, I felt it go. I went up, yep, grabbed the rod, and I'm back into this fish. But there was a big ball of weed on my line, and it was kind of bending my rod tip over down to the water, and then the fish was going. And all of a sudden, I wound down and lifted the ball of weed, and it kind of came in slack. And I thought, oh, I've lost it. I've just got the ball of weed on my rig. But then I noticed that the weed was sliding down my line, and eventually it must have hit the lead core where there was more weed, and I was back into the fish, and we were back in the game. I knew it was a good fish. I mean, I caught a glimpse of it. I knew it was a common, and then after a while, like, she was on the top ready for the net, and I couldn't have been happier, to be honest, because you just think you're going to lose them all the time. Netted it, and it was daylight by now, and I'm thinking, that is Arnie. It's got to be. Arnie is a real special fish in this lake. It's one of the most sought after commons in the lake. It's the biggest common in the lake. Has done mid-40s at the right time of the year, and I photographed it for a mate over here last year at 44 plus. Great big set of shoulders on it, hence the name Arnie. As I'm coming back with a fish, I'm looking at it thinking that's £40 all day long, and I shouted across to me mate, I think I've got Arnie, like, you know, and it was Arnie. Got it on the old scales, and it was 42.5, which is even nicer. It wouldn't have mattered really, it was just a stunner. To get that one on top of 230s as well was like a dream session, especially for like Vinatro. I drove home that day like with the biggest smile in the world. I couldn't care how long it took me to get home. To bring you right up to date, I'm back here in the same swim. As it stands at the minute, the birds have been a nightmare. They're just wiping my spots out all the time. and not really seeing much fish activity. It's been a bit of a funny day really, but today and tonight I'm feeling a bit confident, well, a little bit more confident than I was last night. So let's hope so. There's been a few fish down to my right in the next swim in the day, and I did go down there for the day and fish, but I'm back on the spots again. As it stands, there ain't no birds on my spot, so something's going right. Let's hope that tonight one of the other big girls might give us a visit.
We carried on chatting into the darkness, and it became more and more apparent that this was far from a casual hobby for Jerry. The distance involved, coupled with the other challenges the lake presented, seemed to make the task of catching the halfling nigh on impossible, yet Jerry didn't seem fazed in the slightest. As morning came round, I decided to try and dig a little deeper and asked Jerry to describe the mindset he applies to big carp fishing and why he's so spurred on to go out there and attempt to target particular fish when the odds seem so heavily stacked against him.
Right, this style of fishing, or the style of fishing that I tend to do a lot, is not for everyone. You know, you've got to be prepared to put in so much effort, and you know, like this lake here, for instance, it's a long way for me to drive, so you could be coming down here on a 400-mile round trip perhaps, and blank for 3 days, and then go home, and then you've got to somehow drag yourself back again the following week. I'm quite lucky in the fact that I can do 3 days a week. Well, I am doing 3 days a week on this venue because it's a long way, and the minimum stays 72 hours. Maximum stays 72 hours. So I have to use the 3 days every week I come down here, and I have been doing so since the beginning of March, and it's now August. But yeah, it does take a lot of mindset to get yourself into the right frame of mind and the right approach. And I don't know, it's the kind of fishing I've been doing for the last 10 years. I prefer to target individual fish. In this lake's case, it's like the half linear. That's what I get a kick out of with fishing. I've got tickets where I can go and catch probably lots of fish and quite lots of big fish as well. But that's not really what gives me a kick or what makes me buzz. I want to track down them individual fish. I'll join the lake for the purpose of catching that individual fish, and then that's it. I'm in it for the long haul then. I don't care how long it takes, and I will stay to the end. You know, unless something absolutely stops me from fishing there, I will keep going and keep going. And you've got to try and sort of channel all your thoughts into it. When I'm driving home, I've got a long time to think about the last session, and I'll be thinking about it for the whole couple of hours, 3-hour journey home. What could I have done better to improve my results, or to help me like get a bite, or what could have I done to make it a better session, and what am I going to do on my next session? And I'm forever thinking about it. And then when I go home over the next 4 days, even if I'm in the gym, my mind keeps dropping back to this lake, you know, and where would that big and be now? What will she be doing? And you know, and I'm always thinking, and I think that's a big part of it. You know, you've got to keep thinking all the time of your next approach, on your next session, how you're going to approach it, what tactics you're going to use, what bait you're going to use. And then once you get here, once you get on the lake, the rest of it's down to the conditions, down to your watercraft, you know, your observation. And because I've been here since March, I've watched the lake turn from a freezing cold, wintry water to like a football pitch, basically, covered from head to toe, like bottom to top in weed, 75%, 80% of the lake covered. And then to see the canopy recently, sort of like towards the end of mid-July, completely drop. And then once that canopy's dropped, it reveals loads of little feeding areas on the bottom, which you haven't been able to get to for such a long time. And then making full use of them areas in the right conditions and at the right end of the lake. And that's how I've been fishing recently, finding spots, knowing full well the fish have spawned. They've had a good rest where it was closed for 5 weeks, and then feeding them and trying to get them in them sort of areas to feed. And you know, you've got to look at the characters of the big carp that you're chasing and try and follow its known habits. I know where it's been caught most of its captures. I know it's a big old greedy carp. It loves to eat a few boilies. So with that in mind, you do have to sort of apply your bait accordingly. I mean, in this last trip now, I've put quite a lot of bait out, boilies mainly. This lake's got its own problems like any other lake. We've got eels in here, which terrorise you at night. Any boilie bait application seems to destroy your rigs and destroy your spots, and drive people insane. Most of them couldn't handle it. They'd go home and say, I ain't going back there, can't even put a boilie out. But because of that, you've got to change your tactics, use like hemp and seed and nuts, and that works. And the big one's been caught on nuts loads of times. But she does love a boilie, and I would rather be putting a boilie in, but it's just not always possible. You know, so you've got like the weed and the eels, and you've got a lot of different things to contend with, but haven't you on every lake you fished? Whether it's, you know, on another lake, it might be boats, like sailing, it could be, you know, every lake comes with its own problems. So you've got to get yourself really right in the mind to keep pushing forward. Every time I go home, I'm ready to come back. I can't wait. I'll get home Thursday, and then Monday can't come quick enough. And on the drive here, I'm buzzing. I just cannot wait to get to the lake and try and put to practice what I've been thinking about over the last 4 days. And that's how I keep going. I just keep pushing myself. I don't care if I blank a blank. It's all part of the game. It's all part of building up the big picture. Every time you blank, you learn something. And you know, I was in this swim last week, and it was a totally different ball game. Like, I was on the fish, and they were having it, and I caught 3 carp, and that is a tremendous session over here. Nothing's happening at the moment apart from the birds driving me crazy. But tomorrow morning could all be a different story. I could have the one I'm after. And with that in mind, that's what really fires me up and keeps me going.
During our chat, rain had begun to fall heavily, making filming tricky to say the least, and with only a small gazebo which I erected across the doorway of Jerry's bivvy to protect the camera gear from getting saturated during use, I decided to call it a day. There was one thing that had become apparent when talking to Jerry about his fishing, and that was the fact that he was able to dedicate a large part of his life to the pursuit of these target fish. Was time Jerry's biggest edge? And how would his big carp approach change should he find himself unable to commit the hours he currently does?
I will admit that time is a big advantage in my fishing. It's crucial for me at the moment, especially as I'm fishing these venues that are so far away. But it hasn't always been like that. I mean, years ago, I worked hard. I worked a lot of hours. A lot of my mates won't agree with me, but I think I worked hard. And I was fishing venues with reasonable sort of targets where I know that I'm going to have a real good chance in catching that fish, due to the fact that perhaps I lived quite close to the venue. But I still put in maximum effort and still made the time available to myself. So I do know what it's like to be at the other end of the scale, where time is absolutely crucial. And you know, I put in maximum effort to local waters and still caught the rewards and still caught the fish that I was targeting. But all I'm saying is, if you are thinking of targeting a fish that's a long way off for you to drive, or it just isn't doable because you just haven't got the time, just be realistic about it, because it will make you burn out and you'll soon get fed up with it, and you'll end up sort of giving up because of the fact that you just can't do the time. So time is really important, as we all know. Even if I won the lottery, I'd only really be doing what I'm doing now, and putting in the time on the bank and in doing something I absolutely love.